I don't know if I want to share this, but I'm sharing it anyway.
Lying or minimizing the truth to make someone feel better it's manipulation. You're manipulating. And I notice how often I do that.
Who is Gemma Gilbert?
I'm somebody that is just really committed right now to healing parts of myself that have felt unresolved and showing up in my relationships as authentically me and seeking out experiences in life that feel fulfilling.
Who do you have to be loved?
I hate the other person hurting. I hate feeling like I'm the cause of pain, or even if it's nothing to do with me. If my romantic partner is in pain, I want to take it away. I think I'm a massive people pleaser. I didn't realize I was. This all comes back to my childhood and wanting everyone to be happy. And if there's conflict or people not being happy, is the worst thing in the world.
You feel like they can take the love away.
Yeah. Because you deep down fear that if you actually communicate your darkest thoughts and your truest self, that person won't love you anymore. I remember my therapist and you and lots of people kept asking me the same questions. And I was like...
I'm Ben Edwards, and you're listening to The Heart of It. A few years ago, life humbled me and made me take a long, hard look at my choices. One day, you're going to hear a lot of things about me. Some of those things I can't talk about right now, but I had to make a lot of changes. I lived a life fueled by shame, and shame cannot survive being spoken about. It needs these three things to survive: secrecy, silence, and judgment. So I made the decision to start talking about these things, and I'd like to invite you to listen to how that played out. This is the therapy that I never thought that I needed. Let's get to the heart of it. Gemma Gilbert, welcome to the heart of it.
Thank you.
Episode 001, take 2. We've recorded this episode before.
We have.
And then we've had to come back.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed things to the heart of it, very much to the heart of it. That was very, very good. But we've reflected and we are doing it again, not for lack of authenticity, but through some of the things that we spoke about were not necessarily all of ours to share.
100%, because when you go to the heart of it, you can go to the heart of everyone else's as well.
You can.
And I think my learning from that previous recording is I just want to stick within my truth and what I feel is my journey. That feels more authentic to me.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the beginning then. This is episode 1 to the Heart of It podcast. Last time you said how much of a functioning adult I am to produce this thing, and I couldn't find my shirt.
I think I said you were a contradiction.
Well, I took it as I'm not a functioning adult, which is true. So let's talk about how this podcast formed and then how we met, which formed this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So take us back to the beginning.
So we met on Zoom, and it's one of those really great stories because Zoom room, there was maybe like 15 to 20 people on this Zoom meeting in this in Black Belt Taki Moore's program that we were both in. And you sent me a little DM on Zoom, said, "Hey, are you in David Lloyd in West Bridgeford?" And I only had the wall as a background. So I wasn't like clearly in a gym.
I know David Lloyd, West Bridgeford.
You know the wall.
That's my gym. I can see David Lloyd.
They're my people everywhere. I see them. And I was. And so we met for coffee, which was surreal because, this was an Australian-based program. And we were both within a couple of miles of each other in West Bridgeford in Nottingham. And we met for coffee. And we had one of those, those meetings where you're like sussing each other out. Who is this person? Is this someone I want to be friends with?
It's really difficult to make adult friends.
It is.
And I was like, so I met you in the Zoom room. And I was like, this is a person who I'd realistically want to be friends with through choice, not through them people who you meet and then you sort of end up having a friendship because, your kids go to the same school or you just fall into this thing. I literally wanted to be your friend through choice.
This is a weird feeling for me because, my inner story, my inner child is no one wants to be friends with you. You're different. Why the fuck would anyone want to hang out with you? So when we met and we got on, and because you're good at communicating, you were quite open from the beginning. You were like, I want to be your friend. And I was like, wow, no one's ever just said it like that. They might have showed it through inviting me for a drink, like repeatedly, but you were quite direct in how you felt about wanting to hang out and be friends, which was refreshing and weird. Like it felt weird.
It felt weird to do it because that's new.
Yeah.
I've always had most situations in my life, I don't know to say, have come to me, but I was the captain of the ship and it was like, you know, whatever, I don't know, what's it, Ben show, but it was just naturally throughout my day-to-days, people would come along and come into the world, and whereas I wasn't in that situation at that time. Therefore, when I met you, I was like, it's a conscious thing to go, I've identified this person I want to be friends with. And also because you're female, and I'm a man, I was single all the time, I was single now. I was like, I want you to make sure you knew, I want to be your friend. I'm not trying to, there's no weird ulterior motive, just want to be mate.
But other people find it weird, right? So I wasn't single at the time. We both knew it was platonic, and that we wanted to be friends. But you're like this, you know, hunky tattooed guy. And so everyone started asking me, like, because we trained together a few times in the gym, who's the tattoo guy you're with? I remember my brother saying it. I remember one of our mutual friends saying it. And there's this kind of like, people find it weird when you are with a man that isn't your partner in a platonic relationship. People are almost looking for but what of it? Like, what's really going on? As if there's a big secret. And that was quite an interesting experience for me as well, how everyone else responds to a simple male-female friendship.
I've had that my entire life. So it was less new to me that. Obviously, no one was really saying it to me either way. But yeah, when you were saying, I remember your brother sat down that first time and you said, I forget he's experiencing you for the first time. Yeah,
100%. Because at that point, I knew you for you, and they're responding like you're this tattoo bodybuilder who's, you know, terrifying in some way. It has this sort of like hidden agenda. But I remember being quite cynical as well when we met, as in like, what is the hidden agenda? Because I'm a natural cynic, and I don't think I've had any deep friendships form quickly. So when you do form a deep friendship quickly, the cynic in me goes, well, what of that? What am I missing?
And what happened for me when I met you, and then the subsequent weeks after that, apart from the pocket Yoda thing, so Gemma would start texting me, asking me questions about businessy things, which I knew the answer to. So I answered them, and in fact, for me, my confidence was low at the time. So I forgot that I know how to run a multi-million-pound coaching business to a high level and help everyone else to do that too. So I forgot that. So when you were asking me questions, I was like, it's that. And you give me the validation, like, you know a lot of stuff. This is really helpful.
Yeah.
And then developing the friendship on and the communication we had, you started to share things with me about the time in your life you were going through. And you clocked on that I was going through sometimes also. And I think there was a phone call. I definitely remember you text me saying, do you want to train today? And I like had the busiest day possible. And like, I realized it was like, these are the moments when people need you. And I just removed my day and came to West Bridgeford. And I was like, because that's what I think that's important. That's something that I really value, that in people. And I'd say it paid off. It wasn't a transactional thing, but I was there for you in that time. And then when it was my turn, you were there for me massively too. And the conversations that we had were different to anything I've ever had before in my life, in the sense of there was literally no pretend at all. I had no energy or effort to be anything other or think through all of what you might think or rest of it. I was like, this is the situation. This is me and what I've done here and there and nowhere else.
Yeah.
And you met that with me too, with your own stuff. And we had this unbelievable set of conversations that were like, who's this other person I've met on the planet who thinks in some way I do to certain things and has different things that we could connect on that level, which I've never had that before because I've never really shown people me like that ever.
Yeah, and the same for me. And like the thing that comes to mind is like, well, what was different to those conversations that we had to conversations you have with someone else? What makes them different?
I think they're less different now because I will come with a massive vulnerability to people.
I think there's a lot of time, and this kind of couples onto marketing, right? You're trying to convince people, or you can be trying to convince people because you're trying to convince yourself. When you believe it's so much to be true, you're not convincing somebody by telling them. They could disagree with you, go, well, fine, you do you, but I'm over here I just think this. And I was in that place where I did care what you thought. I know I care people what think, I suppose. But I wasn't going to be ruled by that because what was more important was I say the truth.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be friends with you for however long. And then you go, oh, but that's not what you said then, or this is not who I thought you were. Because I'd had a lot of that go on.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have any more of that. So I was almost like meeting the rejection at the head and going, this is me. Not like dumping on you. But I was like, this is just me, all of me. And I think moving forwards, obviously I do that much more now. But before, we were all so bothered, or I was so bothered, about what I thought I should be or present like, what was acceptable to be like. And now I'm just me.
100%. It's like going into a conversation, like you said, with a vulnerability, that I'm going to say the things that are true to me without story, without putting on a front. And I think in society, because we're sort of conditioned to conform in a way that makes us acceptable to others, that we're constantly modifying for fear of being rejected by the others around us.
Mm.
And I think we both met at a space in our life when we were both in a vulnerable space where there was almost like no energy for front. It was just like, this is the shit show of my life right now. Hi.
Literally was. But and like your level of communication, like I remember asking you to take me somewhere, which was a big deal to me, traveling down south for the day. And you text back, I said, hey, would you want to do this or could you do this? And you text back, I'd love to. And the choice of language, somebody would just go, yeah, sure, I'll come. When's the thing? Whatever. You were like, I'd love to come. When I was obviously so vulnerable to ask, shit, I'm like scared about the thing I was going to. That word, the words matter. What you say matters to people. And I think sometimes, a lot of time in the past, I wouldn't say what I was thinking or meant. At fear of like, I'll still do the thing for them, but I'm not going to let them know I'm involved in it or committed to this too. Just in case, I'll hold a bit back.
Yeah.
Someone literally said something to me yesterday, actually, in the change rooms. And I said, yeah, I'll send you the thing. But just to let you know, if you ever need me, just let me know in the message you need me. I'll prioritize that over anything else. But if you're asking me for like some, link to something, I'll get back to you when I can because I'm busy. But just to make sure you know, if you need me for the thing, look, he's going for a time, that's a priority to me. So why I bring that up is I now let everybody know this is the way that I operate.
Yeah.
Have it.
Language is so important, isn't it? It's like in this kind of modern world as well, where text messages can be misunderstood, language we say can be misunderstood. It's like learning how to say what you actually mean. I think this has been the biggest kind of awakening for me this year is like, say the thing that you mean, not hide the thing that you mean in a few other sentences, hoping that the person may understand what you mean and then get pissed off when they don't really get what you mean.
And then say, if I have to tell you, you don't really know.
Yeah.
You're like, something that my therapist said to me literally 2 weeks ago about a situation. She said, they haven't got the ability to communicate. It's not manipulation if you know. If you're aware, it's not manipulation. Because if it was manipulation, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I was like, So when people are doing this thing, there's two different people. One's a client, one's a friend. And she said, they just have not got the ability to communicate like you can.
Yeah.
They're not able to ask for their needs. So they're not trying to do this. They just do not know how to communicate. And that massively reframed for me that I had to like, oh, you've not got the skill.
100%. I had a great quote the other day as well that I was like, fuck yeah. It was honesty without compassion is cruelty. And compassion without honesty is manipulation. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I've been doing all year.
I remember telling you, do you remember that time I came in and sat on the end table on a Friday and I gave you like 4 or 5 massive quotes that day?
Yeah.
Compassion without boundaries, it's not compassion. You were like,
Exactly. All of this, nice segue into this, these kind of conversations and like the openness to explore without attachment. And I guess this is a coaching thing, right? Is like without attachment to being right or wrong. And I think that's what a lot of people can't do, that their ego comes into it and they want to cling on to their story. And they want to cling on or like save face or like not look like an idiot for thinking or feeling the wrong thing or believing the wrong thing. But like the openness of conversation, which you do very well and kind of live by now, is like the basis of the heart of it, right? Is how can we get to the heart of it? And I think for me and for you, I'm only really interested in these conversations now. When people try to have surface level bollocks conversations with me, I'm like, I don't fucking care. I don't even know how to pretend I do care. I don't care.
No, not yet. And that I've had like just before we came on, I was talking about what people think they're trying to do and say. This is about what's actually the thing. Because when people are talking, and they don't know, I'm trying to stay out of judgment because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think I probably was a deep person, but then also like, you know, the masks we wear on top of that. I think you're meaning people are just not awake as you would refer to the word awake.
100%. And this is an important distinction as well, because I don't think I was awake until a year ago. And I think, you know, by being awake, probably important to define, there's a few different ways we talk about this, right? It's like, I guess it's a level of emotional awareness, is when you sort of just drift through life, mainly ruled by your story. You kind of have surface level conversations and relationships and may feel pretty fulfilled, but you're not really questioning and processing things to a level where you're reflecting on your radical responsibility in your relationships in your life. I don't know if I'm not sure I've explained that well. Can you add anything to that? What does it mean to be awake?
Oh, so the awake thing came from one of your clients, right? Who said about her ex-husband or ex-husband, like they're not awake. I think when you described it to me, it's like, they don't know, they're not there yet. Like you could have a conversation. You did on the first recording. You were like, you corrected yourself. Went, I don't know if the thing I just said was true. You're actively in the moment and after the moment reflecting on whether it's a story, how you responded. Was it right? Was it good? Like, whether it's wrong or right, maybe it's not the right words, but actively thinking about the thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, as you said there, people are attached often to whether they're right or wrong, how they're going to look. Whereas a lot of times, and this is a coaching thing, I say, I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I also say, often when saying, well, you know that thing you're doing? I don't go, that thing you're doing. I go, often when and it's just a choice of language to make it not a blaming and a pointing of a finger. Because almost like we're taking the topic, putting it on the table and going and detaching ourselves from it, dissociating and going, what do you think this is?
It's like we're professional philosophers.
I mean, I'm glad you think we are.
With no qualification. Actually, I did a philosophy degree, so...
I mean, you have got a qualification there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have that.
Yeah. It's a self-reflection. It's a self-reflection on, I guess, the way we show up. But I also think it's an awareness of how our past, particularly childhood, informs who we are today. And this is only something I've explored in the past year. Before then, I just wasn't aware. I wasn't at a state where I was reflecting on all the reasons I may get triggered and all of the things that make up the person I am today.
And that is, I think, the key. I don't know, people go, oh, childhood. Ugh. But it is all from our conditioning. And the triggers, my reactions, still, that physical reaction, there's a trigger, often can be extreme compared to what's actually happened. Because what's actually happened in today's date is not the thing that's affecting you. Although that's someone did something. When I was talking about the thing we just talked about before we came on, the situation happened and I was really affected by it, but not because of the thing, although the thing was still hurtful. It was something that came from 20, 30 years ago.
100%. And when we're not awake, what we tend to do, particularly in relationships, is we're just arguing about the thing that's happened. I'm right. Why can't you see my perspective? No, I'm right. Why can't you see my perspective? And when you're awake, you're like, oh, sure, this, we do need to talk about what's coming up. But like, actually, this is triggered at something in me because I get triggered every time you bring this up. And I go into this irrational behavior pattern every single time. Let's look at that.
And I think there's another element where what is the primary objective of the relationship? So friendship or relationship. And now I use my primary is to make sure I maintain the relationship. So you understanding my point is less important to me than maintaining the relationship.
Yeah.
To me, ramming it down your throat if I ever had to, one, it's not an effective use of communication.
Yeah.
And two, that's not going to benefit the goal of staying in the friendship.
Yeah.
And I think that winning or losing element, when you feel like, listen to my point, is like, that's not the way.
No.
And we spoke about this a lot, about boundaries and about standards. And something I've had to learn a lot about, what actually is okay with me and what is not. And if something is a hard no, to like actually honor that and not be half offended by it, not, and then allow it, and which is something I've done before.
100%. And like, I remember my first coach, Greg Faxon, he said to me really early on a coaching call, whenever you feel resentment, it's because you are not holding a strong boundary. And that blew my mind because it's the first time I had someone point out to me that if we feel a resentment, that we are responsible, not the person you feel resentful at. And I'd just never heard that. And we were talking about it in the really mundane example of like someone, like your partner not doing the dishwasher. And if you feel resentment every day that they're not doing the dishwasher, that's not on them. It's you to communicate your needs, your boundary, and what you're willing to accept or not accept in a relationship with someone. And then you've got to be prepared to maintain the boundary. And I think that's where in modern day relationships, where we often don't have strong boundaries. And then when the other person pisses us off, we blame them.
And I think as well, when I learned in therapy, boundaries keep you safe.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that even mean? I didn't mean. And then obviously as the time's passed and different situations have come up, and recently I had this given back to me, the same therapist said, that's because boundaries keep you safe. And I was like, it all makes sense, because those boundaries from both those people, me was one of the people, that's why I feel safe in this relationship with this person. Same with you. You had boundaries from the beginning of me meeting you, and therefore I feel safe.
Yeah.
Because I knew where I stood. Like we knew what is and is not okay with each other, versus like in the beginning of friendships or relationships or whatever kind, we all do act one way and then we try and put the boundaries in afterwards. Is it like, oh no, I don't really like it when you do it's kind of a little bit like, well, it's quite hard to put them in boundaries in after the fact. It
is. But I think boundaries are so much harder to maintain in romantic relationships, particularly. I feel like with friends, I have quite strong boundaries. Like if I don't want to do something, I say. If I'm hurt, I tend to say. But with romantic relationships, I don't know if it's the chemicals or like the overwhelming feeling that comes with romantic relationships. But that's the one where for me, boundaries are so much harder to maintain because, well, I think the reflection on my behavior is I'm a massive people pleaser. And I didn't realize I was, because I have strong boundaries with friends. But I think like reflecting, like this year for me has been a big year of growth. After the breakdown of my marriage last year, the more I've reflected on, my behaviors, is shone a light on how much I hate the other person hurting. I hate feeling like I'm the cause of pain, or even if it's nothing to do with me. If my romantic partner is in pain, I want to take it away.
Do you also think that it's harder when it's romantic because you feel like they can take the love away?
Yeah. I think, we got into this on the last call as well, didn't we? Like attachment styles. And I'm a disorganized attachment style, which means I'm both.
So actually, when you first told me, you sent me a reel, you were like, I am this, avoidant. And I was like, I totally hear you. Have a look at this one.
So I'm the worst one.
I'm also the same.
Yeah. We're validated knowing we're the worst kind. Like, yeah, see, this is why we're so fucked up. So anxious being, needing, fearful that love will be taken away and needing that kind of more regular reassurance that you are loved, and avoidant often coming from when you've had high conflict or an unpredictable caregiver when you're growing up. and meaning you kind of withdraw and you kind of bottle up your emotions. So anxious avoidant, you've kind of got both. You need to feel loved, but then your tendency is to withdraw and to kind of hold in those feelings.
So just for clarification, there's 4 main ones. There's secure. They're the people who meet someone at school, get married, and have secure, like this great relationship of honesty and trust and communication. And you're like, how come they've got another dog and they're just all happy?
Yeah, and they say things like, oh, I felt kind of hurt yesterday when this thing happened. And the other person goes, should we talk about that so you don't feel like that again? How can I better support you? And they just have these, I don't know, healthy conversations.
Secure attachment. Anxious, when, as you said, leans to what you said. Avoidant, where you move away from. Then anxious avoidant, which is disorganized. So that's the 4. But you can have anxious avoidant leaning anxious, or you can have anxious avoidant leaning avoidant. You more lean avoidant, I'm more leaning probably anxious.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when someone moves towards you, you have a tendency to move back. And when someone moves away from, you have a tendency to move in.
Yeah. And what I found out when learning about this year is that anxious attachments tend to attract avoidant attachments. So you have the worst kind of people together because you've got the anxious people being like, do you want to see me? Do you want to see me? Do you want to show that you love me? And then you have the avoidant person going, back off. This feels uncomfortable. I need space. And then neither of them feels loved because they're both expressing it in a different way, even though they want the same thing.
Which then comes back to communication, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen. I mean, I know obviously we're not in a romantic relationship, but I still think it doesn't happen when you communicate. And so I think, I'm just talking out loud here, that if you're in a romantic relationship, you stop communicating as you would a friend for some reason.
I know the why. I know the reason.
Tell me.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. 2 things. These conversations are sometimes quite long, so we split them into 2 parts. To get access to part 2, plus all the behind the scenes and never before seen footage and exclusive material before anybody else, hit the subscribe button now and download your free VIP studio pass into your mobile wallet. To do that, go to theheartofitpodcast.com/pass. Second thing, as you can see, I'm in a purpose-built studio. I'm a coach and I'm recording a podcast to grow our audience, reach new people, all whilst building trust and authority in our niche. This studio is owned by a 7-figure coach, a company that I'm partnered with who help other coaches to grow and scale their coaching businesses online. If you're a coach, author, speaker, or expert in your field, and you'd like to see how the performance of this podcast translates into business revenue, as well as how much we make from the YouTube monetization and podcast sponsorship deals, just like this one, download the Podcast to Profit Guide, which you can do at theheartofitpodcast.com/podcast profit. Now, back to the episode.
If you're in a romantic relationship, you stop communicating as you would a friend for some reason.
I know the why. I know the reason.
Tell me.
Because you deep down fear that if you actually communicate your darkest thoughts and your truest self, that person won't love you anymore.
I can see why.
Well, because you know my dark thoughts. Shit.
I think it's true. And I think this is where things really blow up, when you can hold space or someone does show you themselves. And then when you do break up or there's a breakdown in the relationship, then the reactions are visceral.
Yeah. 100%. I think this was almost quite reassuring when we met, because when you share very openly about, some of your darker thoughts, and the other person's like, fuck yeah, me too. It's like, oh, cool, you're as weird as I am. And there's something quite validating. Like when you have friends that are just really weird together. And that's the beauty, is that they've learned that, oh, cool, like everyone's not just this normal exterior. Like there's the goofy friends, there's the geeky friends, there's the weird sexual fetish friends. Like whatever the thing is, when you find the like people, it makes you feel more validated that you can be yourself. You don't necessarily fall in love with the person that you felt like you could be 100% open with, or that maybe you were a little bit open with, and then they had a reaction or a trigger. And if you're avoidant, you back away. You're like, whoa, okay, I felt judged there. That didn't feel safe. I'll just bottle this area up and I'll put it over here because I don't think that part of me was okay.
Mm.
And then what can happen is then and I feel like what my natural tendency to do is just kind of shelve all the parts of myself that don't feel quite as acceptable until you're a smaller version of yourself that feels more acceptable and normal to other people.
You sent me a thing once, and I've repeated it many times, that you meet somebody at 20 and you're like, oh, you like the same TV show as me? Let's get married and have kids.
Yeah.
And then you become older and you're like, oh, wait, no, hang on, there's more things that are more compatible. Which makes you think of like the non-negotiables and then the compromises. You meet somebody and you look at but I think this is what people don't do. I don't think they know they're non-negotiables.
100%, because what that little quote said was, like, me at 26, what TV shows do you like? Cool, let's get married. And me at like 36, what childhood traumas do you have that you're going to play out in this relationship to try and heal through your relationship with me? Now, that for me struck a chord so much because I was learning about all my childhood experiences that had informed who I am today. And I think now my non-negotiable, one of them, is that my partner's doing the work. And that means they are actively looking for their triggers and they are learning from them. So they don't keep taking them out on me, because that's not cool. Like, we can hold space for each other and like working through our triggers. But if you have a pattern of behavior of being triggered for one particular thing, you need a partner, one, that can be sensitive to that and like, oh, okay, this is a trigger. Like, let me think about how I might behave next time to not bring this up. But then you as the triggered one have to take on, oh, wow, I really took that out on my partner every time this thing's come up. And I need to look inwards so I don't just take it out on them for the rest of our relationship and them always feel like they're doing something wrong, where in reality, it was like someone else that did something wrong 30 years ago when you were 4 years old.
What happens when someone thinks they're doing the work and they're not actually doing the work? And is that fair to say? Can you make a judgment that someone's not doing the work? What is the work?
Yeah, it's a good question, because like, what does it actually mean to do the work? Can that work just be like as a couple talking through things, or is there like some individual piece you should be doing? And what do you get the tick box for doing the work? Like, I journal every night, I'm doing the work. Or like, I take an ice bath, I'm doing the work. I meditate, I'm doing the work. I don't know. Is it reading literature? Is it that general self-reflection practice we do on a daily basis? Or like my therapist said to me, you need to sit down. I haven't done this for every episode, that trigger that just came up, I want you to spend a 2-week period just reflecting on it. And I want you to go back to that time, and I want to imagine you standing there as an adult, and I want you to speak to the child version of yourself and tell that child what she needed to hear that you weren't told in that moment. And I'm like, yeah, sounds like a really good idea. Do it later.
I guess when I've been in these situations in therapy, I've been praised for the speed I went through some of the changes, I suppose, that happened. And when people ask me about that, I'm like, you said this last time, there was no other option.
Yeah.
I could not stay in the place I was. I had to do something, like a lot. And then you said last time that being vulnerable and open must seem like a piece of piss now because of the pain of what I've been through. And I think when you genuinely want to solve the problem, you will sharp and do, quote, the work, whatever that is. And I think that you have to have people in your life, professional or friends, that are prepared to tell you that I came out that day and someone had let you know that I was a bit, and I was like, I'm not very happy with this. This is my therapist. I was like, I'm not happy with this. And you were like, Ben, you're very good at taking responsibility, and you're not taking radical responsibility in this moment. So it makes me think she might be right. Like, damn you. Because she was right, you were right. But it took for you to say that when I was like, stampy feet over the mirror that had been held up.
100%. And I think this is a useful lens maybe to think about doing the work, is taking radical responsibility. Like, radical responsibility meaning, how can you fully own your actions and your part that you are playing in every role of your life. Because it's so easy to turn the lens to look outwards at the people that are causing us unhappiness or resentment, whether that's in a relationship or with a friendship. And it's so easy to bury communicating our needs and just kind of keep going, keep the status quo. I feel like this is what a lot of people do in life. They don't want to ruffle feathers. They don't really like conflict. It feels awkward to say the thing. And so a lot of people don't say the thing. And I think many people are in relationships where they haven't said the thing for 10 to 20 years. Now the thing's so big to say, when you eventually said the thing, it'd be like, which thing do I say? And I never want to have a relationship where I shy away from saying the thing.
Me neither. I was actually talking to a friend of mine about their marriage. I won't go into detail. But they said, verbalized, they want to get it into a better state where they can communicate some of these things. And obviously, it's a process and work needs to be done, which obviously recognition for the fact that they recognize that.
Yeah.
But it takes two people to do that. And it also takes a lot of skill.
Yes.
That we are not taught.
No.
We are not taught how to understand ourselves or the other person or all those things in between. And there's some concepts, like we just shared the attachment styles, there's the love languages, there's a few things like that, the conceptual based that you can read a book about. But like my book, right? We have a quote and we have stories that bring the quote to life in the chapters. And then there's also like when it went right, when it went wrong, and all the consequences that fell off that. And then when I tried to apply it into the next situation and went, oh no, wait, you have to learn this thing as well. And you put that thing over that thing to get that to work.
100%. I remember having a friend, so I have a very close friend and we chat all the time. And we will talk about something that's not going quite right in one of our relationships. And the action is, okay, cool, you just need to go have this conversation. So say she goes away and she has the conversation. She comes back, she's like, Gemma, that didn't work. That did not go to plan. Because I said this and he thought this and this happened. Because there's like the thing we get really resolute on, like, okay, I just need to communicate this need or this thing, or I need to show what's going on, like shine a light on what's going on. But then we accidentally come across as patronizing or condescending, or like I'm trying to fix you because I have a better perspective on this. And if only you could see this. And then we come back and we're like, oh yeah, that must have made him think that. And then you're back to the drawing board of trying to somehow pull the strings to, it's all really well intentioned, but it's so much harder in practice to say the thing, because you have to accept that you might say the thing imperfectly, which is going to trigger the other person, which is probably going to blow up a reaction. And then you're going to get triggered too. So the saying the thing was just the first step, because then you actually had to figure out a way to talk about the thing from like the non-chimp mode, where you're both open and receptive to doing the work. And what do you do if you don't have a partner that's in that place?
I was just thinking, as you said that, maybe that's the difference between a friendship and an intimate relationship. Because I think knowing the other person loves you and has positive intent for the conversation is paramount.
Yeah.
Because you ring me, right, about things when you know you're going to get, when you want that kind of conversation, you ring me, we go through stuff. Likewise, same. But I know anything you say to me and anything I say to you is from a place of love to help, not to go, well, that's because you did that. Stupid.
Love to help, but also not over help. And I think this is where it can get dangerous in relationships, like romantic ones. With a friendship, we have a certain level of distance. Like you're a person over here and I'm a person over here. If you ask for my like more help, I will give it. But otherwise, I'm just going to be there as like a holding space for you. Whereas I think sometimes in romantic relationships.
What's holding space? Just for everyone's like, what's holding space?
To be that person that you would want to come to and talk things through, and not to be judged or fixed or given like advice that you weren't looking for. To like be the, what's it like, that critical friend that just reflects back. I guess it's kind of what a coach does, but you're like not doing it in that wanky professional way. Like just you're giggling at the word wanky. Yeah. You're a child. Yeah. It's like, if you think there's some people you wouldn't take problems to because they would be, the friends that always try and fix, or they just judge, well, why did you do that?
Or they one-up you.
they want
So when I had this thing, it was way worse than yours.
Yeah. Those are the friends you don't tend to speak to because you know that they're not going to hold space. Whereas the friend that holds space doesn't bring them into it. They don't bring judgment. They just listen and reflect back and help you figure out the way forward. Mm. Whereas I think when you're in a romantic relationship, there can be this confusion of like overlapping of self because especially when you move in together, you start to share lives. There's a certain like oneness and we celebrate this oneness, becoming one person, like souls coming together. And I think sometimes, particularly when we don't have strong boundaries, what we can then get confused about is when that person has a problem. And if you're a people pleaser, you're like, oh, it's my job to solve the problem. It's my job to be so in the pain. It's like, this is an us thing. This is an us thing now. And I actually think sometimes that perception of it being an us thing can actually overcomplicate the roles in that, like, my mum's always described this really nicely. She says, like, I like to think of a relationship as we're two strings on the same guitar. We're not all tangled together. We're choosing to live our lives side by side. But the traditional view of relationships and marriage is like, no, we're going to tangle those strings to shit until we're so combined, right? That like, this is what marriage is. And this is what good behavior is and bad behavior is. And what you do impacts me and what I do impacts you. And then we become so entrenched in not hurting the other person and living this like coexistence that I think it's very easy to lose who you are.
That also coupled with the like personal standards though, like you mentioned responsibility and accountability earlier on. When you become this one person, you're almost relying on the other person to hold your standards. And if you drop them or they drop them, then you end up both dropping them. And then this spiral of like, well, you didn't, and then you didn't. And then you blame them for what you're not doing.
100%. And I also think relationships can be very imbalanced. So one person can be much better at meeting the other person's needs than the other person. And then that imbalance grows of that, like, then almost the people pleaser, the caregiver, steps back from giving as much because they feel their needs aren't being met. And you end up in this situation where you're both actively sort of not meeting each other's needs.
I have a beautiful friend in my life who's a people pleaser.
Is it me?
I mean, you are a beautiful friend in my life. But I mean, I don't see you as a people pleaser. I don't see that because you're good, you have great boundaries, and I don't see that you don't people please me. I guess, I don't think.
No.
I don't know if I'd say the other person people pleases me, but I probably do. I think I now recognise through doing the work and lots of pain and fucking the situation up many times, not with them, that I almost have to be aware that's kind of like their style and tendency.
Yeah.
And therefore, like, I don't know, like run alongside them to make sure they don't topple in, if that makes sense, the metaphor. But you always have to be aware of the people. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It kind of makes me think about business. Number ones, number twos, not like the, like, you know, when people, you probably have this when some of your clients, they're not really an entrepreneur. They're not a business owner. Mm. They've come out of a job, used to being told what to do. And they're like, I'm out, I can do. And then like, there's so many other things into being, for example, a business owner coach. You have to run the business. Being a coach is a small part of the business.
Yeah.
And I think this is like almost just tying this back to a relationship, knowing what your role is or deciding on that role with the person.
Yeah.
And then like, keeping each other accountable, but it is imbalanced. The world's imbalanced. Life's unfair and imbalanced. And the reason why I mentioned that person is like that person gives me so much, and that's their style, and that's their way. But it's really important that for me in that dynamic that I give that other things back to them in other ways and be conscious of that fact. Otherwise, it could go a completely way where you just take from that person because they're prepared to give that. And because you're just kind of getting on with life, you're not thinking, you're just getting on. And then that's where things I think can turn into a take, because the person's giving and you just think, well, they're prepared to give, so fine.
Yeah.
But you have to be conscious of people, like the other people, friendship or not.
Yeah. And I think people pleasers can often give and give and give. And when they only get crumbs back, they take the crumbs. But they never quite understand why they're not getting as much as they give. And I think that's why it is good to know and reflect on the kind of person you are.
I think the crumbs then kill some of their self-esteem and self-respect. And then the other person then doesn't have any respect for them because they don't have respect for them, and it's just a spiral.
100%.
Do you relate to that?
Yeah, definitely. And back to the entrepreneur thing, I think there's like this very clear correlation for me between my development as an entrepreneur and my personal development journey. Because I don't think you can grow past a certain point without doing the work. It forces you. I mean, there's so many aspects. Obviously, you've got the performance area of being an entrepreneur, but like the mindset stuff comes into it so much. And if you don't know who you are and what you want, your growth stalls. And I remember my therapist and you and lots of people kept asking me the same question. They were like, what do you want? I didn't know the answer to that. And then the fact that I didn't know the answer to that sent me spiraling. Like, am I meant to know what I want? What do other people say?
But you were quite good with telling me what you didn't want.
Yeah, I guess spotting the misalignment is what came up for me. And like one thing we were talking about earlier before we came on live was how I read this brilliant post on Instagram from the holistic psychologist, and she was saying basically how the society conditions this good girl role, right? And this good girl, we're conditioned to be people pleasers, we're caregivers. It's not necessarily a negative thing to be a caregiver. But what can happen when you are naturally in that kind of nurturing, caregiving, people-pleasing role is you don't meet your own needs or have your own needs met, and you kind of put everyone else's needs in front of you. And this becomes even worse when you become a mother, because naturally you put your child's needs in front of yours. It feels like a natural inclination. It did for me. But then over time, not having your needs met can come out in very physical ways in your body. And she was talking about like everything from depression and the rates of depression compared to men, fibromyalgia, things that are very hard to explain in the body coming out. For me, it was migraines. I had very, very bad migraines 4 or 5 times a month and no real explanation. I was healthy, I ate well, I exercised, I tried to regulate my cycle, like all of these things, and I'd still have these migraines. And I didn't realize until kind of doing the work this year that that was my body telling me that it wasn't in alignment, that I wasn't meeting my own needs. I didn't have strong boundaries. And ever since that realization, those migraines have completely stopped.
How do you think that links to, do you think that links to people not knowing what difficult feels like?
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. 2 things. These conversations are sometimes quite long, so we've split them into 2 parts. To get access to part 2, plus all the behind the scenes and never before seen footage and exclusive material before anybody else, hit the subscribe button now and download your free VIP studio pass into your mobile wallet. To do that, go to theheartofitpodcast.com/pass. Second thing, as you can see, I'm in a purpose-built studio. I'm a coach and I'm recording a podcast to grow our audience, reach new people, all whilst building trust and authority in our niche. This studio is owned by a 7-figure coach, a company that I'm partnered with who help other coaches to grow and scale their coaching businesses online. If you're a coach, author, speaker, or expert in your field, and you'd like to see how the performance of this podcast translates into business revenue, as well as how much we make from the YouTube monetization and podcast sponsorship deals, just like this one, download the Podcast to Profit Guide, which you can do at theheartofitpodcast.com/podcast profit. Now, back to the episode.
Do you think that links to people not knowing what difficult feels like? You mentioned that feeling in your body, the sort of thing coming out of it. And we spoke before about people don't know what hard actually is until they're in it. They sort of see what they see on social media from other people living their life in where they choose. And we just to keep entrepreneurship for a second, the hustle mode or the 4-hour work week or whatever it is. And then they get confused, I think, of what it actually takes. And I don't think there is a one size fits all, or isn't. But then what people think they're doing versus what actually it takes to get things to work at a high level is, I think, miles away.
Yeah. There's so many different things I feel like I could say on this, because one, I didn't know what hard was when it came to my mental health until this year. Like, I don't think I really understood when people said they had mental health challenges or bouts of depression. I had bouts of feeling low in my life, maybe. But then this year has been the hardest year of my life. And I've been, from like crippling bouts of anxiety to weeks of depression to uncontrollable crying, like going through the stages of grief after a breakup, whilst raising a child, whilst running a business as the sole income earner in my family. Like I never realized how hard it could get. So there's the hard of, yes, it's hard to just show up consistently and run your business and grow when nothing's going on. And then when the shit's going on and you got to do all of that stuff, I have a new understanding of what hard looks like for me.
What came up for me there is the word ego. Let me explain what I mean. I just think back to some of the people I've coached in the past. People don't often want to accept they don't know what they're doing. And I, just thinking that to me, mental health. When people are struggling, they don't often say how much.
Yeah.
For whatever reason that is. I think there's quite clear reasons why people don't do that. People aren't, and this like ties back to what we've been saying about relationships. It's communication. That I cannot understand, get to the place, cope, think about, do whatever. And they're not communicating that. So not able to ask for their needs to be met from a coaching program or their relationship or their friends.
Yeah. Which
then spirals into, I don't know what to do. And I 100%. Do not know how to ask.
Yeah. I think that's really true. And I actually think that's probably helped me grow in my business, because I don't think I have any particular special talent. And yet I've been able to grow, to 20 to 30K consistent months. I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm a very sort of accidental success.
Absolutely not.
And well, obviously not, other people don't necessarily think that. But like, I don't have a lot of ego around what I have achieved. And I think that has had me seek out the right help and just think, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I invested in my first coach straight off the bat, who just helped me every step of the way to like do every piece. And then I invested in the next coach and the next coach. I'm not saying it always has to be coaches, but because I was so lacking in my own ability, I always invested very readily to plug that. And I think accidentally did all the work, act like, oh, cool, I've got another big piece in place, which was lucky for me, because this year when everything's been so hard, I had a lot of the pieces in place that it sort of carried on. I've definitely noticed how my income's been affected by my energy, because I just sometimes just haven't wanted to sell. I haven't wanted to show up. And I've talked about that a lot in my marketing as well. Like, we have to design businesses that allow us periods where we're not able to show up. Otherwise, it'll just crumble every time you have a breakup, a death, a mental health challenge, a health scare. Like, it has to be more watertight than this you showing up every day and hustling.
That's one of the things I share with you about your business, is that it all goes through you.
I know, and it still does. Yeah, it still does. And for me, if I'm honest, I've now used the excuses so often for why I haven't changed that. I can see them for what they are, because now, this year, when people are saying, have compassion for yourself, Gemma, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to I haven't changed it because I'm having compassion for myself. It's not the time to do something new. It's not the time to hire new team members. It's not the time for X, Y, and Z, because I'm having compassion for myself this year. But what about the year before that? Or what about the year before that? So it's like, I think for someone like me, where I've been sort of making the same mistake year in and year out, like I've been stuck at around the same income level for 3 years now.
But you got there really fast.
Yeah.
So we thinking of identity, of we only rise to the level of what we think we are worth. and you've rose to a level, stayed there for a period of time, and also that you've got tangible excuses of reasons why you've not gone higher.
Yeah.
What's the identity shift that you need to have then to grow?
I think the identity shift is seeing the business as not a part of me. Because if, like, Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, I feel like I reached the income level where my ego allowed me to go to. Like, this is a bit big for your boots here, Gemma. You're really someone that earns £300,000 a year. Let's just stay here nice and safe. And let's break it every now and again to make you panic. Whereas I think to go beyond that, it's kind of letting go of the idea that the business is as big as my ego or as big as my self-confidence, and leaning more into the business is a vehicle to get my clients results, and the vehicle can go faster. The vehicle can get bigger. The analogy is falling apart. I can buy an SUV. I can buy a camper van.
Electric, hybrid. Because I was telling you, it's just maths. I was just walked you through this ages ago now. It's just maths.
And it's mindset, and this is a big thing as well. Like I launched a new program last week called Weeks That Work with my colleague Greg Faxon, who was my first ever coach. And we were like halfway through the week, and we were at like 60% of our target. And I thought, we're never going to do it. We're at 60%. It's halfway through the week. We're never going to do it. And he sent me this like really excited message being like, hey, we're 60% of the way through. We're definitely going to hit our 100% target by the end of the week. And I was like, wow, what a nice, tangible example of my shitty mindset versus someone who just had the exact same data and read it differently. And we hit our target. In fact, we hit our target so specifically on based what we said this is what we want to hit. That's what we got.
Which tells you what about setting targets?
That your intention matters?
That you'll get what you aimed for, which if you don't aim for anything, you're going to get nothing.
Yeah, and this is early on in our conversations of business, and I was always trying to figure out like, how do I go from 30 grand to 40 grand? And you were like, no, how do you go from 30 grand to 100 grand? And I was like, no, Ben, I don't want to go to 100 grand. You don't understand what I want from my business. And you're like, for fuck's sake, I'm just trying to get you to solve the bigger problem, not the next problem. And that's what I've been doing for a long time, firefighting the next problem. So the identity I actually have to let go of is that I am a last minute person. And that because I am a last minute person, I can't grow. Because even if I hold on to the identity that I am a last minute person, I can still grow. I just need a team of people that aren't last minute people around me. Is that right, Ben?
I don't think there is a right or a wrong. It just is what it is. If I can share with you something, I think you've already heard me say this before. The reason why when someone says, I'm doing 30,000 and I want to do more, they often do the next little leap up. And I always say, what's the bigger leap? Because you then have to think so differently, because the 40 grand mindset versus the 30 grand mindset isn't really the shift. And it's really less about the 100,000 a month. It's more about what would have to happen for that to happen. And then you start to think about it in a totally different way. You said the identity there is stepping into more of having a team that can deliver. Actually, you're really focused on client results.
So I need marketing and sales.
So when you focus on client results, you're like, no one can do it like me.
Yeah.
I can't get the team or other people. I have to be in all of it, do all of it to guarantee success, which is control.
Yeah.
And the reason we struggle with control, or sort of struggle with surrender, is because you want control. You never really had control. You had anxiety.
Yeah.
So really having anxiety that I can't grow past this without being in all of it. And therefore I can't be in all of it. It won't be very good. And therefore it'll fail.
And I'm learning how much I value certainty. And I don't know if this became from like the kind of the unpredictable caregiver thing, but like I realize how insecure I feel when I don't feel like I have control or certainty. And I feel like I can only have control and certainty if it's me.
How does that go back to your relationships?
Good question. Well, friendships, I think I've always found friendships very, very uncomfortable. I think I've always had this feeling that I am other, that there is like this secret friendship handbook over here of how friends are made, and I'm not in it. So it's like when I shared in my marketing this feeling, this that everyone feels, I don't really fit in. I don't like small talk. I hate these kind of social gatherings where everyone just seems to have these social skills where they know how to communicate in an interesting way. And I don't feel like I have that. And I always have no interest in having small talk. When I shared how much I didn't fit in, this was when I launched my membership. I actually just turned into the sales page for my membership. I was like, I don't feel like I fit in. I never felt like I fit in. This is how I felt like at school. This is how I felt like at uni. This is how I feel like in my adult life. And everyone was like, oh my God, me too. Ironically, it was nothing about what the membership was about. It was about marketing and sales. But, that feeling people really, really resonated with. But I think because I feel like I lack control and certainty in friendships, I just don't have many. And I only have ones with those kind of long-term friends that have shown me over time that this is a permanent thing, that we are friends, that we trust each other, that we love each other. And I probably have 4 or 5 close friends.
The first time I told you I loved you was fairly funny. Well,
yeah, it was. I found that really uncomfortable. That brought up a lot of stuff for me. There was like the cynical, what does this person want from me? Why is he telling me he loves me? The second, societal, this is weird. Friends don't tell each other they love it. Even though I would tell a female friend. Me and my best friend always tell each other we love each other when we're on the phone. And then the third part was like this allowance for me to have my own view on this, that this felt good, that this felt really nice in our friendship. But I really didn't want to tell anyone because I knew if I said to anyone, my friend told me he loved me, they'd be like, and it's a guy? Yeah, he has feelings for you. Yeah, he wants to fuck you. You just know what people are going to think. And I think this is what makes me panic sometimes about relationships is sometimes you want to share your truth, but you're so scared you're going to be judged or told a story that you don't want to hold yourself. And so then you have to kind of create this barrier. You're like, do you tell, for example, your romantic partner that one of your guy friends has said he loves you? On the one hand, it's none of their business. On the second, if they found that out and you hadn't told them, like, would they find it weird, and like, why are you not sharing openly? So there's all sorts of dynamics that came up for me with that.
Depends on what kind of relationship you're in, right?
100%.
I said to you before I came on that, how many other people are having friendships in this way? Is that if that's your focus group, then it's all normal. Like people come into my world now and they're like, oh my God, all your friends are absolutely incredible. Like they're all talking about this stuff. And I'm like, that's why they're my friends.
Yeah.
And they're like, my friends just talk about, and I'm like, oh, well. And then they're kind of like drawn. We don't hang with people that are not like that. Unless you're on this page, you're not really in our thing. It kind of comes up as well. We spoke about this last time. People want the end product of the friendship or the business or the social circle or the access or what they can perceive as what that person gets to do. But they don't think about or would want all of the things that come with that or what it took to get there. Tell me a bit more about that.
So
hi, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. 2 things. These conversations are sometimes quite long, so we split them into 2 parts. To get access to part 2, plus all the behind the scenes and never before seen footage and exclusive material before anybody else, hit the subscribe button now and download your free VIP studio pass into your mobile wallet. To do that, go to theheartofitpodcast.com/pass. Second thing, as you can see, I'm in a purpose-built studio. I'm a coach and I'm recording a podcast to grow our audience, reach new people, all whilst building trust and authority in our niche. This studio is owned by a 7-figure coach, a company that I'm partnered with who help other coaches to grow and scale their coaching businesses online. If you're a coach, author, speaker, or expert in your field, and you'd like to see how the performance of this podcast translates into business revenue, as well as how much we make from the YouTube monetization and podcast sponsorship deals, just like this one, download the Podcast to Profit Guide, which you can do at theheartofitpodcast.com/podcast profit.